The pounding on my door shook the entire house. When I opened it, two so-called HOA officers stood there, claiming they were here to confiscate my home. But here's the thing, my neighborhood doesn't even have an HOA. That's when I realized this wasn't business. This was a scam. And they had no idea that they just threatened the wrong man, a retired Navy SEAL. Bang, bang, bang. The pounding on the front door came so hard and sharp that it shook the glass panes. I wasn't expecting anyone that morning. My German shepherd Duke immediately sprang to attention, barking with that deep warning tone that always meant, trouble is here. When I opened the door, I saw two strangers standing on my porch. Both wore cheap polo shirts with little HOA patches sewn on them and clipboards in hand. They didn't look like officials, but they sure acted like they owned the place. "Sir, we're the Homeowners Association," the taller one said with fake authoritative voice. "We're here to inform you that due to repeated violations and unpaid fines, this property is being confiscated. You have 24 hours to vacate." I almost laughed in their faces. Confiscated? This wasn't a rental. This wasn't even in an HOA neighborhood. This was my house, bought with my hard-earned money after serving 20 years as a Navy SEAL. But what caught my attention wasn't their words. It was the way they stood. Nervous. Shifty. One kept glancing at my security cameras. The other had sweat dripping down his forehead, even though it was a cool morning. Something told me this wasn't just some scam. This was a setup. "Look, I don't know who you think you're talking to," I said, keeping my voice calm, "but this house isn't under an HOA. And even if it was, you can't just take somebody's home." The shorter one smirked. "You can argue with the court later. Right now, you've got 24 hours. I crossed my arms and stared him down. In the SEALs, I learned one important lesson. Read the enemy before they make their move. These guys were dressed wrong, spoke wrong, and carried themselves wrong. And then it clicked. Their shoes, muddy construction boots. Their clipboards completely blank. And their vehicle parked at the curb? Not an HOA-branded truck, but a beat-up old van with no license plate. I smiled. They weren't HOA officers. They were scammers. But they made one big mistake. They picked the wrong house. I decided to play along. "All right," I said slowly. "If this is official business, why don't you come back tomorrow with paperwork? I'll be ready." They smirked, thinking they'd intimidated me. "We'll be back. Don't say we didn't warn you." As soon as they left, I went straight to work. I pulled up my security footage. I called my old buddy Frank, who now worked with the local police. And most importantly, I prepared Duke and myself for whatever might come next, because my gut told me those men weren't coming back with papers. They were coming back with trouble. The next night, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, Duke started growling low and steady. I peeked through the blinds. There they were, the same two men, only this time they weren't alone. A third man stood by their van, keeping lookout, and this time they weren't carrying clipboards. They were carrying crowbars. They weren't pretending anymore. "All right, Duke," I whispered. "Showtime." I slipped on my boots, grabbed my phone, and turned on the security floodlights. The yard lit up like a stadium. "Hey!" I barked through the open window. "You lost, gentlemen." The men froze, caught off guard by the sudden light. "Sir, this is HOA business," one of them stammered. I stepped outside, calm as ever, with Duke at my side, teeth bared and ears pinned back. "Funny," I said, "because I checked with the county this morning. There's no HOA here. And you know what else? I called the police. They've been waiting for you." The lookout by the van panicked and bolted. The other two stood frozen, unsure what to do. But I could see it in their eyes. They were desperate. That's when one of them made the mistake of raising his crowbar. Big mistake. Duke lunged forward with a snarl, stopping just short as I commanded. "Hold!" His teeth snapped inches from the man's arm. The guy dropped the crowbar immediately, his bravado gone. And just as they realized they were in over their heads, red and blue lights flashed across the street. 3 police cruisers pulled up fast. Officers poured out, weapons drawn. Hands where we can see them. The fake HOA officers dropped to the ground instantly, caught like rats in a trap. Frank, my buddy, walked over shaking his head. Well, I'll be damned you weren't kidding. Turns out, these weren't just scammers. They were part of a small crew that had been targeting older homeowners in my town. Their trick? Dress like HOA officers, claim people owed fines, and then scare them into paying up or abandoning their homes. They had already conned 3 families in nearby neighborhoods, taking thousands of dollars. And if I hadn't seen through their act, they might have gotten away with mine too. The police hauled them off in handcuffs. But here's the part that still gives me chills. In their van, officers found fake eviction notices, lockpicking kits, and even lists of target houses. Mine was at the top. The next morning, neighbors gathered on my lawn, whispering about what had happened. Some were shocked. Others were angry. Many had no idea scams like this even existed. I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, Duke sitting proudly at my feet. Folks, I said, let this be a reminder. Always question anyone who shows up at your door claiming authority. Real officials don't come in unmarked vans. Real officers don't hand out threats without paperwork. And if something feels off, trust your gut. One neighbor asked me, how did you know they weren't real? I smiled. 20 years in the Navy taught me to read people before they even open their mouths. And these guys? They were amateurs. The crowd chuckled, but the lesson stuck. Those fake HOA officers thought they could intimidate me. They thought they could bully a homeowner into giving up his house. But they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know a retired Navy SEAL lived here. And that, my friends, was their biggest mistake. So in the end, those fake HOA officers didn't just fail, they got hauled off in handcuffs. And the biggest lesson here? Always trust your gut. Always ask questions. And never let fear push you into a scam. Because sometimes the people knocking at your door aren't who they claim to be. They thought they could take my house, but they didn't know a Navy SEAL lived here. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable true tales, and let me know in the comments, what would you have done if fake officers tried to take your home?